What if a place could rewrite your destination without ever touching your GPS? That question still hangs over the 2014 Serra Nova incident, a night when every device within 5 kilometers lost signal at exactly midnight and returned seconds later with coordinates no one had entered. Screens flashed white, routes shifted on their own, and every arrow pointed toward an abandoned mountain road sealed decades ago after a deadly landslide. Drivers reported the atmosphere turning unnaturally dense, the kind of heaviness that dulls sound and tightens breath, while a low subterranean hum spread beneath the asphalt like something buried was stirring. Among them was Daniel Mercer, a seasoned surveyor who knew Serra Nova better than most. Yet, even he hesitated when his device displayed a new message no GPS should generate: return to origin. As he followed the redirected path, the hum deepened, the ground shivered, and the beam of his headlights cut across a tall, motionless silhouette standing where the road collapsed, just before his camera burst into static and the signal vanished again, taking Daniel with it as though the mountain had been waiting for someone who wouldn't escape twice.
Locals claimed that after Daniel vanished, the mountain didn't return to silence. Instead, the hum spread, faint but persistent, slipping into the engines of parked cars and making their dashboards flicker as if something inside them was trying to speak. By midnight, every GPS in Serra Nova reset again, this time displaying the same cryptic phrase, "He is not alone." Panic rippled through the small town as drivers abandoned their vehicles and fled toward the main square, where even the streetlights trembled with the same pulse that had swallowed Daniel. Investigators later reviewed footage from one surviving dashcam, a recording left behind in a truck whose owner had escaped on foot. The video showed the device zooming in and out on its own, locking onto coordinates that shifted every few seconds, as though tracking movement in the dark. Then, for a moment no longer than a breath, the camera caught a figure standing on a ridge above the collapsed road, tall, narrow, reflecting no light at all. Before the screen warped, the coordinates spun wildly, and a distorted whisper crawled through the speakers, urging the viewer to follow the path Daniel had taken, as if his disappearance had only opened the way for someone else.
By the time authorities arrived at Serra Nova, the mountain felt wrong in a way no report could adequately describe. Air colder than the altitude allowed, a pressure that made radios crackle even when turned off, and the persistent hum vibrating through boots as if the ground itself were breathing. Teams deployed signal jammers, but every device still rebooted at 00, replacing their coordinates with a new phrase, "The path opens tonight." Investigators traced the origin of the signal to a fault line beneath the collapsed road, yet no equipment dared register what pulsed inside it, returning only scrambled data and looping timestamps that suggested time was folding in on itself. As night settled, mist coiled along the ridge, thick enough to distort shapes into towering figures that watched without moving. One officer, Reyes, approached the edge with a thermal camera, hoping to prove the silhouettes were illusions, but the device heated violently, forcing him to drop it, and its last captured frame showed something impossible, an outline matching Daniel's exact height and posture, standing deeper inside the landslide zone as if waiting for someone to follow. Before Reyes could react, every GPS in the valley restarted once more, arrows spinning madly before locking on to a single point, far beyond the rubble, a destination that hadn't existed on any map for decades, yet was now calling them closer. As midnight approached again, the field team set up a perimeter around the collapsed road, but the mountain refused to behave like terrain. Its fog shifted in synchronized pulses, rising and falling with the same rhythm that corrupted every GPS the night Daniel vanished. Technicians activated analog equipment hoping to avoid interference, yet even those devices vibrated with the low, resonant hum as if an unseen engine deep in the fault line had begun to accelerate. At 23:58, the temperature dropped sharply, frost blooming across metal cases, and the mist thickened into a wall that swallowed the floodlights until only faint halos remained. Officer Reyes stepped forward, determined to confirm whether the silhouette resembling Daniel was merely a projection, but before he could cross the boundary, all the GPS screens flashed white simultaneously and displayed new coordinates, ones that led past the destroyed road to a narrow trail erased decades ago. The moment the team tried to radio headquarters, their signals collapsed into a distorted voice repeating a single phrase, "One must enter." A second later, movement surged inside the fog, and a human-shaped figure emerged. Same height, same stance, same slow inclination of the head. Yet when Reyes called Daniel's name, the shape raised its arm and pointed directly at him, as if choosing him. Reyes froze as the figure held its arm out, unmoving, as if the choice had already been made long before he arrived. The fog around it curled inward, tightening like a funnel, and the hum beneath the ground deepened until the loose gravel trembled at his feet. The team shouted for him to fall back, but their voices warped, bending in pitch, as though carried through a tunnel that shouldn't exist. Then, every GPS lit up at once, projecting a new command in pulsing red letters: "Follow the Chosen." Before anyone could stop him, Reyes felt a pressure against his chest, subtle, invisible, but undeniable, pushing him toward the collapsed road. The temperature dropped again, cold enough to sting his eyes, and within the mist he glimpsed a second silhouette forming beside the first, identical in height and posture, mirroring the way Daniel once stood during field inspections. The resemblance was too precise to dismiss. As the fog shifted, both figures slowly turned and stepped deeper into the old trail, and Reyes felt the force behind him grow stronger, compelling him forward as if the mountain itself refused to let him remain among the living unless he obeyed. Just as he reached the boundary, the ground emitted a sharp metallic snap, and something answered from inside the fault. 3 slow knocks, echoing upward, deliberate, expectant. The 3 knocks reverberated through the valley, each one heavier than the last, as though something vast and ancient were signaling from beneath the mountain. Reyes stumbled back, but the invisible pressure pushed harder, guiding him toward the narrow trail that hadn't existed on maps for decades. The mist parted just enough to reveal faint impressions on the ground, footprints that matched Daniel's boots exactly, yet were too fresh, too sharp, as if they'd been placed moments ago rather than years in the past. The team attempted to grab Reyes, but their hands passed through the fog and briefly vanished, swallowed by a darkness thicker than shadow. Radios shrieked with static, then abruptly synced to the same distorted voice that had whispered before, now repeating a new phrase with chilling clarity: "The door will not wait." As Reyes stepped onto the forbidden path, the silhouettes ahead of him split into multiple shapes, each one mimicking Daniel's posture like echoes of a man replicated through time. The hum grew louder, rising into a mechanical drone that made the rocks vibrate. Then, from deep within the fault line, a narrow vertical slit of pale light flickered open, unnatural, sharp-edged, pulsing like a heartbeat, illuminating a portion of the landslide debris already shifting aside on its own, as though something on the other side was preparing to emerge. The slit of pale light widened with a grinding sound that didn't belong to stone, metal, or anything natural. It was a mechanical scrape mixed with something organic, like gears turning inside a living throat. Reyes stood frozen, the cold radiating from the opening numbing his skin, while the false silhouettes, those replicas of Daniel, shifted to flank him on both sides. Their movements were delayed, as if mimicking him a fraction of a second too late, reflections not in mirrors, but in memories being overwritten. The team behind him shouted his name, but the mist swallowed their voices, twisting them into distant echoes. As the opening grew, the GPS devices across the valley rebooted violently, displaying coordinates that spiraled on screen before stabilizing into a single, impossible reading: 0.00000, 0.00000. A location that should have meant nowhere, yet the ground trembled like something beneath recognized the sequence. Reyes took another step forward, compelled by an invisible force tightening around his spine, and the pale light surged outward, illuminating a humanoid figure inside the fissure. Not Daniel. Taller. Thinner. Its limbs too long. Its head bent at an angle, suggesting it had been listening to them long before it revealed itself. Then it raised one hand toward Reyes, palm open, as if offering him a place on the other side.
Reyes felt the air thicken as the humanoid figure inside the fissure extended its open palm, its skin reflecting the pale light like a surface not meant for the living. The mist behind him tightened, forming a barrier that pushed him closer until his boots scraped the edge of the ancient trail. The replicas of Daniel mirrored every tremor of his hands, each twitch delayed, each breath distorted, as though they were learning how to be human by copying him. The slit of light widened again, revealing carvings on the inner walls, symbols he didn't recognize yet felt disturbingly familiar, as if they had been waiting in the back of his mind for years. Static burst through every radio at once, followed by the same voice that had haunted the valley, now whispering with near-human cadence, "The threshold accepts the one who follows." Reyes's pulse hammered, but the invisible force tightening around his spine pushed harder, guiding him toward the outstretched hand. The figure moved closer, its elongated fingers trembling with anticipation, and for a heartbeat he thought he saw Daniel's face flicker within its silhouette, distorted, pleading, before vanishing behind layers of shifting light. Then the ground beneath Reyes vibrated in a rapid sequence, like coded knocks, and he realized the mountain wasn't opening a path for him, it was pulling him in.
Reyes tried to brace himself, digging his heels into the crumbling trail, but the ground shifted like loose sand as the slit of pale light pulsed in steady rhythm, each flash pulling him closer in short, jerking motions. The humanoid figure stepped halfway out of the fissure now, its elongated limbs bending in angles that defied any natural anatomy. Its face, an ever-shifting blur of features that almost aligned with Daniel's before dissolving again. Behind Reyes, the mist walls tightened and began to rotate slowly, forming a spiral that rose into the treetops like a funnel cloud made of breath. The replicas of Daniel closed in, each one staring with those hollow, unblinking eyes that reflected nothing. Radios across the valley switched on by themselves, sinking into a synchronized beat that matched the hum beneath the earth. Then the voice returned, clearer, deeper, carrying a weight that felt ancient. "Step through or be unmade." The fissure yawned wider, its interior stretching impossibly far, revealing a corridor of trembling light that bent downward into darkness. Reyes's chest tightened as the invisible force locked around his ribs, squeezing until spots filled his vision. He managed one last look at the world behind him, the fog, the lights, the terrified silhouettes of his team, before the ground beneath his feet fractured, splitting open like a mouth ready to swallow him whole.
At 12:58, the forest shifted in a way none of them could comprehend, as if every tree, stone, and shadow were preparing for an event written long before humans ever stepped into Serra Nova. The ground pulsed with a slow, rhythmic vibration that climbed through their boots and settled in their ribs, syncing their heartbeats to something unseen beneath the soil. Their GPS screens heated until the plastic casing softened, and the coordinates, no longer numbers, but jagged symbols, began to spin in tight circles, forming a pattern that resembled an eye slowly opening. Maya whispered that maybe the signal interruptions in 2014 weren't accidents. Maybe the devices had been warning humanity to stay away from this place. Then the air thickened, shimmering like heat over asphalt, and a vertical slit of white light tore open between the trees. The forest bent toward it, not blown by wind, but attracted, pulled as if gravity itself had changed direction. The slit widened into a perfect doorway, revealing a metallic shaft descending into darkness. And the GPS unit synchronized again with a final message: "Enter before you are found." From deep below, something enormous began climbing toward them, slow, deliberate, metallic, and with every echoing step, the doorway expanded as if eager to swallow them before the thing emerging could reach the surface.